made him out to be a user of people.
Oh,
that
yes.
he used people and for whatever they could give him, and then he threw them away. But also, in reading it, I just kept thinking, maybe he was bipolar.
He could very well have been, but they didn't have
that's,
that diagnosis back then. He certainly had his quirks.
Like he would
But-
turn on the charm and then ignore you the next
Right.
day, and
I know people like that, though.
Oh, I do too.
or maybe he was just acting the entire time. Who knows?
Well, there's some of that too. He
He
was a complex character.
He had a very, very troubled childhood. His mother died when he was young.
And he was very close
He
with
was
her.
very close with her. In fact, I've read things that said he was a mama's boy.
So I think that led into his relationship with Edna, because she became like a mother
figure. She really cared about him. I mean, I know her friend asked her to go with her to go to this girl's house on Skid Row, and she was very uncomfortable even being on Skid Row at all.
Well, both of them were once they got there. They were like, oh, what are we doing here?
Yeah, this is not where we should be. Ed Ifkovic did an excellent job of making you feel the seediness of the area, because you felt uncomfortable going, oh, get out of there.
Well, I
So-
just kept thinking, yes, I've been to some places in Baltimore that make me
Haven't we
feel that
all?
way.
Yeah.
You know, we know how the book ended. Do you feel that at any time there were any other suspects that
Oh, I
were-
think they did very good job of trying to pin it on half the people in the book.
Well,
The only
I
one
was-
Edna was about the only
right. Well, Mercy too. Mercy
Yeah.
just had a good alibi, but I kept leaning towards Jake Geyser
I did too.
as the culprit. He
Yeah.
was so
Seedy.
I think it was
yeah,
set up
he,
that
and he
way.
lied. It was a toady.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he just
He was
not
Jack
honest.
Warner's go-to boy. And I think people know by now, of course, if you haven't read the book.
Once again, if you didn't read the book, you might want to stop now, because we will tell you the ending.
Well, we just told you it wasn't Jake.
Right. And we know Carissa is killed. Edna begins to look into the murder because she is concerned about James Dean, that he is getting railroaded. I think she has motherly instincts. She wants to protect him, plus protect her movie, because if he goes off the deep end, they got to start all over again or shelve the project. Most of the people in the book, Jack Warner, Geyser, even his friends, all kind of assume that James Dean's guilty.
Yeah, but they were going to protect him anyway.
They were going to
Yeah,
protect
yes.
him, but they assumed this girl, she kind of deserved it, so what if he did?
Yeah, they really didn't care too much
No.
about who
Which is
actually
really,
killed her.
really something and really scary.
It's sad. It's really sad.
That there were people that were throwaways that,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
oh, well,
Well, that was, unfortunately, that's the story of Hollywood back then. Some people were throwaways. You use them and lose them.
I'm not sure it's much different today.
probably not.
Well,
Luckily,
it's more covered up today because I think they do a better job of.
see, I don't think
hiding
so. I think
things.
they're more vulnerable now because everything, they can't sneeze without
Well, that's
Somebody
true.
catching
The
being on
internet.
social media.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, I grew up knowing that movie stars put their pants on one leg at a time, just like me. So I was more impressed with the people who wrote and put their talents on paper than I was about what was on the screen.
I agree. I can appreciate a good actor or actress, but that's as far as it goes. I don't think they're any better than anyone else. Sometimes they're a lot worse than other people.
But I found the impressions of the movie stars in this book, like Edna Ferber thought Rock Hudson was very wooden. She was not that impressed with most of the people in this movie, except maybe she did like Chill Wills, and she did like Elizabeth Taylor.
Apparently, everybody liked Elizabeth Taylor.
Well, I think that was true even when she died at 80-something?
Yeah,
That
I don't
she
think...
was just a person that you couldn't despise.
Any interview I ever saw, she always just seemed so, she cared about people. And
The only person who would disagree is probably Debbie Reynolds.
Oh, yes.
Or how many of her ex-husbands?
Well, they all parted friends. She married one twice. So I think Richard Burton,
Richard
didn't
Burton,
she
she married him twice.
Yeah. So, but
I can't imagine ever marrying somebody again if it didn't work
if
once.
I got rid of one, I don't see doing retakes on that one. What did you think about Tansy?
She annoyed me.
I agree.
She was so forgiving of anything that James Dean did. I mean, he could do absolutely no wrong in her book.
And she facilitated a lot of the lies he told. If she could cover up for him, she was right there. She was...
Oh, she did, ultimately. She took care of all that business with Carissa.
Yep.
And what did you think of the police officer, Cotton?
He was going to get James Dean. He was sure he was guilty, and he thought the studio was covering up for him and making excuses for him, and he was going to hang him.
But I liked his relationship with Edna. I think
it built.
And I think that she started to respect him. He started to respect her. And I like at the end when he bought her flowers and pretty much gave her props, even though she should have gotten
all of
more credit than she did for solving that crime.
But I think that they showed that he really was a good detective because Edna would say, "Oh, I found out about this. You have to know about this." And he'd say, "I already know about that." And she's like, "Well, why didn't you tell me?"
Because you're not a police officer.
Right. So he was doing well, and most of the evidence he found was circumstantial, but it did lead to James Dean. It was just the very crucial evidence that Edna found that absolved him.
Yeah. I think if I was a detective back then, I would have been looking at James Dean double time.
And James Dean didn't make it easy either.
He didn't help himself.
He was not cooperative. He was untruthful. He was rude.
Yes, he was. He thought nothing of showing up.
I think the people that were the most interesting and also the most creepy in the book were Alice and Alva.
They just creeped you out just reading. Ugh.
Ifkovic did such a good job of setting you up to just think they gave you the willy.
They would be arrested today for stalking.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Because
there's stalking laws because of people like that.
Right. They went everywhere James Dean went. They were either there or came right afterwards, and they would stay there until they saw him. If they got word he was anywhere, they'd head off. They just creeped you out because that's all they thought. They would drool as they were talking about James Dean.
These are the kind of people that I know. I wouldn't want to be a movie star anyway, but it's things like that just scare you, that there's people like that out there that throw their whole lives. I mean, this was their whole life was following James Dean.
There were people who wanted to emulate James Dean, like his friend Tommy Dwyer and even Sal Mineo, they said, dressed exactly like James Dean. So that's creepy enough.
Yes, but Tommy Dwyer wanted to be James Dean. He didn't just copy him. He copied his voice. He copied mannerisms. He dressed like him, talked like him, smelled like him.
Exactly. That's creepy.
It is creepy.
but it's like a lower level of creepy than Alva and Alice.
Yeah. Polly was Tommy's girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
She was also in love with James Dean, but she couldn't get James Dean, so she went for the closest thing, which was Tommy, who was a copy of James Dean.
Settling for second best.
So,
but she was also out for his best interest, too. She would tell him, you have to look out for yourself, and
Who? Tommy.
Yeah, she was talking
trying
to Tommy.
to.
She really was
trying to get him to live his own life.
Yeah, that seemed like everybody in this book either wanted to be James Dean or was desperately in love with James Dean.
Or hated him.
Or hated him.
Very few people
But
hated
the
him,
hate was purely from jealousy or...
Right. Rock Hudson.
Except for George Stevens, the director. He really hated James Dean because he couldn't make him
do what he wanted
do
him to
what
do.
he wanted to do.
Right.
Then you have people like Rock Hudson. He was the movie star back then. And this young, good-looking upstart came along. And Rock Hudson's getting kind of shoved aside. Of course, he was getting a little bit older because he was in his early 40s, I guess, 30s or 40s. James Dean was only 25 years old, and he was just coming on the scene. And wow, I think with Rock Hudson, it was sort of a love-hate.
Yeah, well, like with Sal Mineo, too.
They were infatuated with him.
Well, they kind of alluded Rock Hudson made a pass at James Dean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And now that we know, that probably did happen.
Yeah. Probably.
They referred to it as experimenting.
Right.
They wouldn't come out and say.
There was also, if I'm remembering correctly, there was a implying that he had sex with Max Cole at one time, that they had
but they kind of
fling.
Honestly, I got the impression that James Dean was bisexual.
But they wouldn't say that.
No,
They,
but even beyond that, he didn't like girly men. He liked he-men. Right.
And Max was a biker.
They call bears.
Do they?
See, she knows more than I. Not that there's anything wrong.
I read. Now, before I read this book, if you would have asked out of these characters, who would you want to meet? I would have probably said somebody like Rock Hudson or Elizabeth Taylor or one of those. But after reading this, I would want to meet Edna. I love to hang out with Edna. I think her and I would have been fast friends.
I liked Edna as well. I also liked Mercy a lot. We haven't talked about Mercy.
No, we haven't.
She facilitated a lot of Edna's investigations because she was the insider. She knew all these people. She knew the ins and outs of Hollywood.
Yes.
She knew who to talk to, when to talk to them, why they weren't talking to them, that sort of thing. And she was Edna puts it, look straight in your eye kind of woman, I think is what she said.
Yeah, the ones that I had questions about, or less opinions about, were the hangers-on on the outskirts of the story, like Nell and Lydia, and they all had something to do with the issue, but they weren't.
Well, sometimes I think they're put there to muddy the waters so you don't have to, you need people to play off of, too.
Yeah. But I thought it very interesting that James Dean took Edna for a ride in his Porsche Spider, and of course,
that's
the car that
took his life.
Yeah.
Took his life, and he had only just gotten that car.
That was a sweet scene, I thought.
It
was.
Because
he wrapped her up in a blanket so she wouldn't be cold, and a scarf, and, kind of took care of her. I thought that was a sweet scene.
It gave a picture of the James Dean I would want to remember, that he was a caring person. He wasn't this...
Oh, you must not have a bad boy fixation, because
no,
I'd want him to be a bad boy.
I did not. I just...
I think you're being a fibber there. We all like the bad boy.
No, give me a bad boy any day.
There was nothing like seeing him walking down with his white T-shirt and his blue jeans. He had his cigarette packs rolled up in his sleeve.
That's not playing by the rules.
With that DA haircut. That was
tight jeans.
Yep.
That's the bad boy.
But he was pretty to look at. Oh, God, was he pretty. Okay. You did some research. Let's hear it.
Well, I have been doing research on where our novels are taking place, but I think everybody knows all about Hollywood.
Hollywood? Where's that?
There's a Hollywood, Maryland. Did you know?
Oh, well, that wasn't where we were going here. There were a lot of true to life people in this book. So I decided to talk about these characters and who they really were in real life. Ed Ifkovic did a great job of portraying them accurately as far as I can tell. First, of course, we have Edna Ferber. She was an American novelist, short story writer, and playwright